Just about every time we use the internet, a communication link, or an app, we agree to some very long terms and conditions. But what exactly are we agreeing to?
You guys! You gotta help me! These business casual G-men are trying to kidnap me! What? It's crazy, dude! They're saying it's because I agreed to the latest terms and conditions on iTunes! Why? What did the terms and conditions for the last update say? I don't know! I didn't read them! You didn't read them? Who the hell reads that entire thing every time it pops up? I do.
Can you tell, can Apple tell how many people actually read it?
Well, they have to say that they agree.
Right.
We can't know for sure if they've read. We try to make it in plain English and very short.
If I were trying to make a user agreement uninviting, I would choose a small font, a sans serif font, and I would set it in all caps. Okay. Because what happens then is that you have type that becomes a texture rather than words and spaces.
No one has read the terms and conditions. No one in the world. No one, even the lawyers who wrote it like this.
You come to a website and they have a set of rules, usually described in a terms of services, and then they have a privacy policy. And as soon as you start using the service, in essence, you have agreed to the terms of service and the privacy policy.
Do these terms and conditions that we sign up for even apply?
They do. I think if they didn't apply, I think the web would topple over. And so to the extent there have been contract decisions, they've held that these terms and conditions are valid.
And this concept is pretty new. For instance, you never had to sign a user agreement for an old-fashioned landline, or to watch TV, or to read a book. But if you use a smartphone, a Kindle, or you watch Hulu, then you do.
Violet, baby, don't you sign anything there. What's this all about?
Standard form of contract.
Don't talk to me about contracts, Wonka. I use them myself. They're strictly for suckers.
Yes, but you wouldn't begrudge me a little protection.
In fact, if you were to read everything you agreed to, it would take 1 full month of work out of every year. That's 180 hours you would need to spend every year. And according to the Wall Street Journal, consumers lose $250 billion each year due to what's hidden in fine print. Here's an example from LinkedIn's terms. You grant LinkedIn a non-exclusive, irrevocable, worldwide, perpetual, unlimited, assignable, sublicensable,
Fully paid up and royalty-free right to us to copy, prepare derivative works of, improve, distribute, publish, remove, retain, edit, process, analyze, use, and commercialize, in any way known or in the future discovered any information you provide directly or indirectly to LinkedIn, including but not limited to, only generate content, ideas, concepts, techniques, or data services, used in different LinkedIn, the outputs and money, and not competition with you, or any
So LinkedIn takes pretty much everything forever. You'll find this kind of language in Google, Pinterest, Facebook, pretty much anything that people consider free.
Instagram is finding that pictures are worth much more than 1,000 angry words after the company updated its user agreement to say it would have the right to sell posted photos without compensation for use in advertising.
And even if you are paying, companies have the ability to make you accept just about whatever they please. In 2009, GameStation, a company in the UK, put some pretty sneaky stuff in their terms. They didn't take money or your firstborn child. But for one day, their terms stated, by placing an order via this website, you agree to grant us a non-transferable option to claim, now and forevermore, your immortal soul. The contract was only live for a day, but GameStation happened to rake in the lives of 7,000 immortal souls. This was of course a joke. However, it makes you wonder, what if there were more serious consequences that might result from not reading terms and conditions?
And what if your phone came with these long terms and conditions said, well, if you use the phone, the government can wiretap you? That would be insane. But that's the kind of world we're living in.
A world where the government could wiretap you because of terms and conditions? So, if you look at the iPhone user agreement, wiretapping isn't mentioned. But in AT&T's privacy policy, they say that they can use data to investigate, prevent, or take action regarding illegal activities. Prevent? In 1994, Pizza Hut became the first major chain to accept a delivery online. Suddenly, the internet needed a way to remember who you were, where you lived, and how you were going to pay.
My question is, what the hell?
Like, how do they know who you are?
Yeah.
Okay. There are these things called cookies, where, like, if you go to a site and buy something, it'll remember you and then create ads for other stuff you might want to buy.
So it learns information about me? Seems like an invasion of privacy.
It wasn't until the late 90s that companies began voluntarily adding privacy policies to explain what was happening with this data. Then, in 2000, An online company called ToySmart went bankrupt. But they had an idea. They tried to sell their database of 195,000 users to another company. This included names, billing information, shopping preferences, and family profiles, even though their privacy policy said they would never share information. People felt like they were being duped.
Lawmakers tell you time and time again that every time they go back to the district, to their district, people are telling them that they want some internet privacy laws. They want some protection.
In early 2001, over a dozen bills were introduced in Congress to protect privacy online.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed.
All of the privacy legislation was killed or abandoned, and the Patriot Act was, of course, initiated.
The bill before me takes account of the new realities and dangers posed by modern terrorists. This new law that I signed today will allow surveillance of all communications used by terrorists, including emails, the internet, and cell phones.
The Patriot Act expanded the ability of the federal government to do surveillance in a lot of little ways. You don't need a judge's approval, for instance, to find out what website someone visited, what search terms they typed into Google.
The question of your, if you will, information being retained by Google is not really at this point a Google decision. It's really a political or public policy decision enforced by different governments in different ways.
What if privacy policies weren't about protecting privacy at all, but rather taking it away? Let's take a look at Google's privacy policy around this time to see if any changes were made. Google claims this is their first privacy policy, which it isn't. So why would Google not include its original privacy policy on its own archives page, one that said you would remain anonymous? What if the data collection that the Patriot Act required became the foundation of a whole new business model, and the foundation of the modern internet as we know it? Would that be something worth covering up?
Even though we don't write checks to Google, and that's one of the reasons we kind of like the company, it doesn't mean that Google's really free, or that we are free in the liberty sense when we use it.
That was a really critical finding, in that advertising could be, targeted based on information that people were somehow, supplying about themselves. Suddenly, you didn't have to wonder, was somebody watching my commercial? You knew someone clicked on my ad. That meant that they paid attention to it.
In 2012, Google was one of the most valuable stocks in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, had become one of the richest men in America. When personal data is worth this much, why would Google or any free internet service be opposed to the data retention that the Patriot Act required? Anonymity wasn't profitable.
You always want something free. And plenty of people are willing to provide information to get that.
And plenty of companies picked up on this fact.
Let me give you some very practical tips. First of all, I want everybody here to be careful about what you post on Facebook.
What the default settings are on Facebook. This is how most people use this technology. When these companies are building these systems, they know that.
The way we've designed the site is that it's a community thing, right? So people want to share with just their friends, but a lot of people also want to share with the community around them, right? So I want to share with everyone who works with me at Facebook. I want to share with everyone who went to my college, everyone in the village around me. And those people aren't just my friends.
Even Mark's explanation doesn't make any sense. He says he wants to share with the school, with the quaint village next to him. He doesn't say he wants to share with the entire world. And yet, that's the default.
The challenge with defaults is that you get comfortable with whatever the default is. When the default is public, you actually can adapt really beautifully and deal with it. When the default is private, you can adapt comfortably and deal with it. When the defaults change, that's when problems emerge.
And in fact, that's what Facebook did. In 2009, Facebook made changes to their privacy policy without telling anyone.
Doing a privacy change for 350 million users is a really, it's not the type of thing that a lot of companies would do. We decided that these would be the social norms now, and we just went for it.
You might remember the fan page with over 1 million people who tried to get the policy reversed. What was the big deal, you might ask? Well, over the course of a night, Facebook turned what was once private information into totally public information.
These platforms have an incentive to keep as much information about you and make it as visible as possible.
It's almost the question then becomes, what's the less forgivable sin? Having this crazy one-night stand or not knowing how to use Facebook properly?
Most relationships in your life, it's very good that the other person doesn't know everything you've ever said or scribbled or thought. I'm okay with Facebook behaving like a company, but I think we need to treat it like a company and not treat it like some benign public utility.
These are the default settings on Facebook in 2005, divided into 12 categories. As time passes, more and more information is shared by default. In 2009, Facebook began automatically sharing personal information with the entire internet. By 2010, everything was shared by default, except for your contact info and your birthday.
We could, if you did a search and a Gmail and a YouTube and so forth yesterday, and you did it from your home, I'll give you the worst case. You did it from your home, and you only have one computer in your home. In theory, we could cross-correlate those and get all three together. We don't do that, and we're not likely to do that.
But in January of 2012, Google made changes to their privacy policy, and they did just that. Google combined all of the information any of their services had collected about a person and put them into one single profile. What Eric Schmidt had said was the worst-case scenario, Google had actually done.
How can you honestly sit here and tell this committee this is not a growing problem?
A good deal of what I was trying to say is that I don't think there is evidence of a market failure or consumer harm from the legal and legitimate use of personal information in commerce. I don't think there's evidence of it.
There are companies that you've never heard of, like Axiom, that claim to have about 1,500 points of data on the average American citizen. Everything from, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, what kind of dog you have, what your sort of psychological outlook is, and all of that can be used to inform decisions that businesses make about us as well.
These are the types of companies that a potential employer would go to try and run a background check on somebody before they hired them. They're able to connect the fact that you went to site A and then later to site B and then eventually to site C and create this detailed history of what sites you visit online.
They don't put your name in the cookie. They put a unique serial number in the cookie that could then be linked to your name in their database.
The company might use it in a way that actually harms you.
In Minneapolis, a father came into a Target, outraged that they were sending his teenage daughter pregnancy coupons that were addressed to her. The man thought the Target was trying to encourage his daughter to get pregnant. As it turned out, thanks to her shopping habits, Target knew that this high schooler was pregnant before her own father did. The father later apologized. And in the Netherlands, data was being used to harm customers in a whole new way. Now, while you're driving and using a GPS, that GPS is sending back signals that tell how fast you're moving. It's really useful for helping us avoid traffic, but that got a little company called TomTom wondering who else might be interested in knowing the speed of traffic. And so in the Netherlands, the data that people were willingly trading to find a faster way home was being sold to the authorities to give those same drivers tickets.
Is the reason we don't have any baseline consumer privacy law because of the FBI? No. That is largely due to lobbying by companies that have built extremely lucrative businesses around these business activities and don't want to do anything to disrupt that.
Under Facebook's terms and conditions, a user must be 13 or older. Despite this, according to a recent Consumers Report study, an estimated 7.5 million users were younger than 13.
First of all, we don't allow people to have accounts under the age of 13.
And my reaction to that is that's just absolutely indefensible. I mean, it's unbelievable that you would say that.
Well, Senator, I just want to say we really emphatically agree with your points.
They say that Facebook sent an army of lawyers so that the final privacy legislation that emerged in 2011 was watered down significantly in a way that wouldn't affect Facebook's business model.
What did Facebook have to lose?
I
really do not understand their logic, and you'd have to ask them about that. But when I analyze an issue like this...
I'd love to ask them about that. They won't talk to me, so...
I'm not surprised.
I don't think the rules of law and regulation necessarily apply when it comes to, interacting with, a company that wants to sell you something.
Yeah, we should be worried.
But worried about what? Sure, the data collection allowed by privacy policies had fueled commerce, but was there something more serious we were agreeing to? Total Information Awareness, a program initiated by the government in January of 2002. Its mission, to collect every digital transmission imaginable.
Pentagon is clearly moving to create the largest electronic eye ever to look at any and all Americans.
You're looking for trends and transactions that are associated with some potential terrorist act.
They believe that with enough data that they could predict who would be engaging in nefarious crimes.
The public was outraged. Congress was outraged. The program was shut down.
The lesson that the government learned after the failure of total information awareness was that if you're going to create a gigantic spying program, don't give it a creepy name.
There's nothing to prevent them from developing the same capabilities, just in smarter ways from their standpoint.
A wiretap requires a court order. Nothing has changed, by the way.
But in reality, lots had changed.
We were told one day in late 2002 that an NSA representative was coming to the office.
Mark Klein came to us at the Electronic Frontier Foundation with data and documents that showed that AT&T was engaged in a wiretapping program. They actually had a secret room in their facilities, and they were creating a copy of internet traffic and sending it to the NSA.
So in a sense, they are vacuuming up, scooping up
Since they are blindly vacuuming up everything going across those links.
And you're certain of that?
I'm certain of that.
So President Bush owned up to it.
I authorized the National Security Agency to intercept the international communications of people with known links to Al-Qaeda and related terrorist organizations.
It's taken less than 24 hours after the Bush presidency ended for a former analyst at the National Security Agency to come forward to reveal new allegations about how this nation was spied on by its own government.
The National Security Agency had access to all Americans' communications, faxes, phone calls, and their computer communications.
Is there a recording somewhere of every conversation I had with my little nephew in upstate New York? Is it like that?
It would be everything, yes. It would be everything.
But then a beacon of hope arrived in the White House.
Hi, Senator Obama. I appreciate your giving us the opportunity to ask you questions. I'm an attorney who represents federal whistleblowers, and I was very disappointed when I learned that you supported the bill that lets phone companies off the hook when they've helped the federal government without warrant wiretap phones.
I recognize that some people feel like, yeah, well, the phone companies still were complicit in this. They should be held accountable still. I understand that argument. But the problem was the surveillance program is actually one that I believe is necessary for our national security.
Barack Obama did not shut those programs down after he took office, even though he had threatened to before he became president.
When we got started just in my dorm room at Harvard, the question that a lot of people asked was, why would I want to put any information on the internet at all? Like, why would I want to have a website? And people have really gotten comfortable not only sharing more information and different kinds, but more openly and with more people. And that social norm is just something that's evolved over time.
According to Department of Homeland Security reports, Facebook has replaced almost every other CIA information gathering program since it was launched in 2004.
After years of secretly monitoring the public, we were astounded so many people would willingly publicize where they live, their religious and political views, an alphabetized list of all their friends' personal email addresses, phone numbers, hundreds of photos of themselves. and even status updates about what they were doing moment to moment. It is truly a dream come true for the CIA.
You know, the FBIs and the NSAs of the world are appreciative of the fact that Google and Facebook, you know, have built business models around collecting user data because it makes their jobs much easier.
That article in Time started with this anecdote. They're sitting in their transparent cubicle, in their open space in Facebook. Robert Mueller was the one man in the room with a tie on, and he was older in a suit. And he comes in and he says, I was just in the building and I wanted to say hello to Mark Zuckerberg. So he says hello to Mark Zuckerberg, a little chit chat, and then he leaves. And everybody's saying, what the hell was that? Now, nobody asks the question, why was Mueller in the building? He's the head of the FBI.
On the one hand, Mark Zuckerberg has said he wants to create a more open society, and Facebook is a way to do that. On the other hand, you know, there's a lot about the way that Facebook uses information that people don't know.
If only there was a way of knowing how much information these companies were storing about us. Well, in the case of Facebook, we learned some pretty interesting things thanks to one student in Austria. And unlike the US, Europe has a law that requires a company to tell a customer what data they have stored on them, if that customer wants to know. And Facebook, unlike most major internet companies, had actually built a headquarters in Europe.
Apparently we were like the only 3 people that were like pushing hard enough and like asking again and again and again, and going through also the Irish authority to finally really get at least like a bigger part of our data set. We still didn't get everything right now. Got it right there, just to have like an idea how much it actually is. That's like just
Can I hold
to
it?
picture it and to see how much it is.
Wow, this is more than a baby.
Yeah, that's 1,222 pages. I'm a member of Facebook for 3 years, but I was using it more intense for like the last 1.5 years or so. What's interesting as well is that I didn't post too much actually. Like I'm a person who posts something like once a week or so.
With this giant ream of information in front of me, is it hard to go through it and actually find specific details about a person?
No, that's super easy because it's I mean, we just used the search function in the PDF file. So you just type in one word, let's say demonstration or sex or a political party or something, and within a second you find the right information. So within a couple of minutes you can figure out what people voted for, what, I don't know, psychological problems they have, what parties they've been to. All these informations are like really easy to find actually. While using that service for such a short time, you still had a data file that's bigger than anything that any CIA, FBI, or I don't know, Stasi ever had about an average person. If you hit the remove button, it just means that it's flagged as deleted. So you hide it actually from yourself. But anyone like Facebook or any government agency that wants to look at it later can still retrieve it and get it back. And that means that it's there for an indefinite time. Even though you hit the delete button, it asks you 3 times if you really, really want to delete it.
It's not actually gone.
It's not actually gone, it's still there.
So we've ultimately adopted roughly the following rule. We think of it as we anonymize the information within 18 months.
It might be anonymized after 18 months, but all of the searches that we've ever done are still there. The underlying data is still there to be de-anonymized at some point.
And de-anonymizing search records turns out to be shockingly easy. That is, taking private searches and finding out whose records they are. In 2006, AOL turned over a bunch of these anonymized search records of their users to the public, and it only took a few short hours for a reporter to decode who user number 4417749 was. Between searches for things like numb fingers, 60 single men, and dog that urinates on everything, the reporter uncovered a woman named Thelma Arnold. She was age 62. But then there's user 175566639, who looked up how to kill your wife multiple times, along with decapitated photos, and then in the middle, the user actually looks up steak and cheese. Steak and cheese. And there were plenty of users online who were quick to judge what was going on here. It was murder.
Rainy, easy.
Hey, old friend.
Easy.
So, let's take a seat and I'm going to show you something.
Okay.
What I'm showing you here is a list of anonymized search records. These records were released by AOL. Are there actually things on this list that you know you've searched for before?
Sure. Yeah, I have definitely looked up car crash photos. I've definitely typed in decapitated. I've definitely looked up dead people photos. I've definitely looked up wife killer. Yeah. In fact, I've looked up every single search term I'm looking at here.
You see, Jerome had been a writer on Cold Case, a TV show where each week cops have to solve a murder mystery.
That's always what scared me when I was entering those search terms, was if there's some sort of automated system that just red flags you based on the search term, they're not going to look and say, oh yeah, he was probably working on a TV show, and that's why he was just Googling how to murder my cheating wife.
So we can rest assured, you are not a murderer.
I am not a murderer.
You are a writer.
I'm a writer.
Okay.
Glad we can clear that up.
Glad we could clear that up. So, what would happen if that red flag system did exist? If a dad like Jerome might someday have his door knocked on because his search records became public.
The consensus seems to be that the retention of this kind of information should be greater than 0 days. And the reason it has to do with police actions, terrorists, Patriot Act, all those sorts of things.
If you look at news stories now about what they call big data is really looking up the question of how can government and corporations work with that data in order to look for anomalies and predict when you're going to do something so they can stop you from doing it.
And the government isn't even that secretive about it. If you visit their business website, there's an application there looking for developers to create better tools for mass surveillance of our online activity. Examples for surveillance include, but are not limited to, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Which brings us back to that word you'll find in many user agreements. It's the word that sent us down this whole path in the first place. Prevent. So this might make you wonder, what potential threats would all of the surveillance we agreed to actually prevent?
Basically, January the 3rd, 20 days before I go on holiday, I tweet, "Are you free this week for a gossip/prep before I go destroy America?" Ended the tweet with a kiss, as threatening as that is. 20 days later, get on a flight, go to LAX. We had a hotel in Hollywood Boulevard. We were just gonna potter around for a week, just looking around, just being tourists. Got off the plane, went through the passport control, swiped my passport through, and they're like, "Can you come this way?" And I was like, it's because I got an Irish passport. I thought maybe Irish people is like stereotype, IRA bombers. They went through my suitcase, and I was like, oh, what are you doing? And then when they pulled me into the holding room, I was questioning me for 5 hours about whether I had a Twitter account. I was like, are you being serious? Are you actually holding me because of a tweet? And they're like, what do you mean by destroy America? And I was like, to party, it means to go wild, get drunk. Any moron that could read that tweet can see what it's meant as. Like, it ends with a kiss. I'm sure, like, Hitler doesn't end his memoirs with a kiss or whatever he did. So then they moved us to a holding room. But then at midnight, the staff changed over and they weren't aware of what we were there for. So they handcuffed us, stuck us in the back of a police van, and then took us to a downtown like prison detention center. Innocent people shouldn't be treated like absolute dirt. And they were dragging us around, pushing us into walls.
Sounds like a horrible vacation. Is the government refunding you at least?
No, they won't comment on what happened. Well, if I'd put I was going to paint the town red, they'd have me done for graffiti as well, wouldn't they? When I go to other countries, this is going to show up that I got refused from America, so more than likely I'm now going to get dragged off at every airport and questioned about what happened, and I have to explain to them that it was a tweet.
I'm Italian, Irish, French, Portuguese, Native American, Black. I'm even like 1/18th Avatar.
This is Joe Lipari. Joe Lipari had had a rough day at the Apple store. He had been forced to wait in line for 4 hours before finally leaving.
So I get home from the Apple store, still a little irritated. Smoke a little dope, put on Fight Club, just trying to relax, go on Facebook.
And this button-down Oxford cloth psycho might just snap and then stalk from office to
office with an armor-light AR-10 gas-powered semi-automatic weapon. And I said the same thing, but except the Apple store.
Pumping round after round.
And, basically word for word, except for where. Hanging out on Facebook, getting ready to go to yoga class, and there's a shave and a haircut. 2 bits, knock on my door. So I was like, hey, maybe somebody's here to watch Fight Club with me. Open it up, boom, NYPD SWAT, their bulletproof vests on, their guns drawn, and they tear the place apart. You know, they really go through everything. When the one cop, finds the box that has all my like military awards, he comes bringing it down. He's like, oh, you were in the military? And we start talking like, Army talk. He sees that I speak the language. And that's when he asked me, he was like, so do you know what an Armalite AR-10? And I was like, that's why you're here, guys? You're here because I made a bad joke on Facebook? Like, it blew my mind. Like, it's the ultimate buzzkill, really. Your Facebook page is brought SWAT to your house.
3 minutes after being done with my lunch, I was told to go up to the office. And then I would sat down inside the vice principal's office, and I wasn't told what was going on until maybe 10 minutes later.
My phone rings, I look at it, and it was the number to his school, and I answer it, and it's the school security guard just giving me a FYI, for your information, just to give you a heads up, the Secret Service is here with the Tacoma Police Department, and they have Vito, and they're talking to him.
A man walked in a suit and glasses, and he said that he was part of the Secret Service, and he told me it was because of a post that I made, and it indicated as a threat towards the president.
Yes, a 7th grade boy was visited by our FBI because of a red flag that came up in their spy system.
I was saying how Osama is dead and for Obama to be careful because there might be suicide bombers.
It didn't consider his age, or that his comment about Obama needing to watch out was one of concern. The machine simply determined that based on a series of words, Vito was a potential threat.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes. No, I didn't do anything.
This arrest that happened on the royal wedding day when I attended a zombie flash mob wedding picnic.
Right.
And myself and 4 other zombies were arrested preemptively for potential breach of the peace.
Even if you dress up as a zombie, it seems to me that the crime isn't really committed until you eat some brains.
Yep. To be fair, we did have some brain cake.
Oh.
So there's that.
How did they know that you were going to be dressing up as a zombie this day? There could have been emails or anything
It
really.
could have been, like, it's hard to know. Yeah.
I think that's the toughest
That's the
thing,
scary
right?
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
The indication that they were monitoring private social networks came in the way they were reacting to certain things and asking about certain things. So they were asking about maggots and asking about climbing gear, which they must have heard about through some exchanges on the internet, neither of which was true. Nobody had maggots or climbing gear. Not something that was itself posing a hazard to the royal wedding celebrations. We were nowhere near the royal wedding celebrations, and we had no plan of going near the royal wedding celebrations. You can see that surveillance measures are being used to silence protests before they even happen.
The activists didn't need to commit any crime. They just needed to text, to email, and to call each other about potentially protesting.
But I think that the answer is not to take away the capacity of looking at the public actions of citizens and keeping a record of them. The solution is to make sure that we elect better governments.
So one of the things I hear a lot is, who cares if they're collecting all of this information about me? I don't have anything to hide, so why does it matter?
Well, I know this argument, and it is not very new. It's old-fashioned, saying we are complying with rules, and so what happens?
Between leading the sinful life I would like to lead and hoping that governments will protect my privacy, or assuming that no one's going to protect my privacy and leading a less sinful life, I'll go with the latter. It's simply just the odds of success seem higher to me.
I congratulate the people who say they have nothing to hide. I don't believe them. And I also say that they're probably hiding something from someone. We all do.
You have nothing to hide till you do. And you are not necessarily going to know what you have to hide or not.
You might remember the case of Millie, a teenage girl in Britain who disappeared in 2002.
Police in Surrey say they're growing increasingly concerned about the safety of a 13-year-old girl who hasn't been seen since Thursday afternoon.
Before the police found her body, her parents were holding on to hopes that she might still be alive.
I'd say if someone has taken Millie and is holding her, then please, please give her back to us.
Why is that, you might ask? Well, because according to phone records, Millie had checked and deleted her voicemail.
We were sitting downstairs in reception and I rang her phone.
Yes.
And it clicked through onto her voicemail, so I heard her voice.
Yes.
And it was just like I jumped. She's picked up her voicemails, Bob, she's alive. And I was just, it was then, really.
As it turned out, members of Rupert Murdoch's corporation had been hacking into Millie's phone, trying to be the first to reveal details of this national news story.
Right, I think this is the watershed moment when finally the public start to see and feel, above all, just how low and how disgusting this particular newspaper's methods were.
This was a murdered schoolgirl, and the thought that a very tight-knit circle of very senior politicians linked up very closely, intimately, with the police and with the media mogul, Rupert Murdoch.
For 30 years, as British prime ministers came and most certainly went, a constant character in their worlds was Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire media mogul whose press...
For years, celebrities and individuals like Millie had the voicemails they thought were hidden and private accessed by Rupert Murdoch's corporation at the expense of people like Millie's parents. And it took nearly a decade to expose the misuse of this highly personal data. Do you think privacy is dead?
I mean, it's certainly dying. Whether or not for privacy yeah, I mean, privacy is going to remain dead unless there's a really fundamental shift in the dynamics by which that's decided. By which I mean the only real effective response is to monitor and to change the behavior, the tendencies of the intelligence industry and law enforcement and all that, and even companies. And that's very, very unlikely.
I don't know exactly who the us is, but I'm very critical of us. I think that this is an area in which we have allowed ourselves to be smitten. We want this technology to grow and grow, and we don't want anything to rain on our parade. And we have woken up to the privacy concerns, in my view, at least 4 years too late.
I mean, is privacy dead?
Yeah, without question. Without question, yeah, it's dead.
It's safe to work under the assumption that nothing's private. You know, anything that's been digitized is not private. And that is terrifying.
When this becomes the size of a blood cell, then I can just send them into my brain and my body through the bloodstream. This will become quite ubiquitous, and it really will be part of who we are. And people say, well, okay, that's going to be a real threshold to move beyond, but I don't think so. It's a very smooth continuum from, you know, when I was a student and had to take my bicycle to get to the computer, to having it in my pocket, to having it in my body. It's a convenient place to put it. I won't lose it that way.
But they say if you put a frog in a pot of water and slowly turn up the heat, the frog will just die because it doesn't realize it's boiling. And I think that, like anything else, I think we're opting in a centimeter at a time. And, you know, pretty soon you're pretty far down the road. You look behind you and you sort of wonder how you got where you were. I think that's true.
All of these powerful institutions, they're not subject to the same invasions of privacy as the rest of us are.
Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, once said,
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Then he got very angry when CNET, which is owned by CBS, published a picture of his house. Well, when you ask Google about Do Not Track, they claim we have to understand how to define that before we can implement any technology. Do Not Track's pretty simple. It means we don't want to be tracked. The only reason Google doesn't understand it is because Google doesn't want to implement it.
Unless someone comes and makes it no longer practical for them to engage in that kind of activity, pressure is put upon CEOs of the companies. They're going to engage in it.
He'll know that I checked in here too, so that's good. He knows that I'm right next to his house. Let's see, we have here's the exact quote from Mark. So, having two identities for yourself is an example of a lack of integrity. Lack of integrity. They just did a knock up on his door, so it seems very likely that we might get a Mark Zuckerberg sighting today. I mean, you might not be wrong, Vince. Ben might actually have a tunnel. There's some definite motion in the yard. Is there a dog? Here we go. Let's walk down. Mr. Zuckerberg? Hey, I'm working on a documentary. Got a little blog here, but wondering if I could just ask you a couple questions.
No, sorry.
Really?
I can't work.
Can I ask, do you still think privacy is dead? What are your real thoughts on privacy?
Are you guys recording?
We are.
Can you please not?
I can stop, yeah. All right. Mark Zuckerberg had asked me to please not record him, so we shut off the main camera. But since Mark doesn't seem to mind storing our data after we think it's been deleted, this only seemed fair.
Can you please not?
I can stop, yeah. All right. Can I come by your front desk, though, and ask about setting up an interview?
Yeah, I mean, we have a department where you can talk to people about that.
Yeah, I know. I've tried going through it a few times, and I never hear back. There's a major difference here. Mark loosens up after he thinks we've stopped recording. And you see that? That right there. That's a smile. Mark Zuckerberg smiled at me. And you know why? Because he thought I had stopped recording, and he was relieved. Imagine what a relief it would be if all of these companies and the government stopped recording everything we do, if we could just make a simple request to them, something that Mark Zuckerberg knows how to ask for. Can you please not? Can you please not record us, monitor us, and share our information unless we ask first? We need terms and conditions that are reasonable. And we need privacy policies that promote the most basic principles of our democracy, rather than taking them away. Or, as a young senator once said, back before he became president,
we need to find a way forward to make sure that we can stop terrorists while protecting privacy and liberty of innocent Americans. We have to find a way to give the president the power he needs to protect us while making sure that he doesn't abuse that power.
And that simple principle that there's somebody watching the watcher, whether that's on an issue of freedom of the press or it's an issue of warrantless wiretaps, that simple principle is one that we can't give up, and we don't have to give up.
well, Mr. President, we are watching. And I guess we have to ask ourselves one simple question. Do we agree?